Declaro abierta la sesión.
The 7,614th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Somalia. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Somalia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Michael Keating, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Somalia and Head of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Somalia, and Mr. Francisco Caetano José Madeira, Special Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for Somalia and Head of the African Union Mission in Somalia. I'm inviting them to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome Mr. Keating and Mr. Madeira, who are joining via video teleconference from Addis Ababa. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2016/27, which is the report of the Secretary General on Somalia. I now give the floor to Mr. Michael Keating.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm delighted to speak to you so early in my tenure, and it's a pleasure for me to be briefing you alongside Ambassador Madeira, who has been in post since December 2015, and therefore is an old hand already compared to me. Before I start, Mr. President, allow me to pay tribute to my predecessor, Nick Kay, who handed over a mission that is in good shape. All my interlocutors in Mogadishu, Somali, and international, African Union and United Nations have stressed the critical role that he and his team played in the last 2.5 years. I would also like to pay tribute to the international community and to this Council, which has played a pivotal role on Somalia for several years. The unity of the Council is a fundamental requirement for progress in Somalia, and I look forward to working closely with you. Mr. President, let me begin with some first impressions. I was lucky enough to spend some time in Somalia in my youth, when Mogadishu was thriving, and again in the 90s when it was in turmoil. My 2 weeks as SRSG have not been Somalia's easiest, marked by tough political negotiations and marred by 2 horrific terrorist attacks. Yet, the Somalia I have seen is closer to my childhood memory than the nightmare of the Civil War. It is a country of enormous potential, of determined people with entrepreneurial spirit, with extraordinary natural resources, a privileged geographic location, and a natural gateway. Somalis know their potential, and they are eager to realize it. In the wake of the terrible attacks at El Ade and Lido Beach, their spirit is doubly impressive. I pay tribute to the bravery and dedication of AMISOM and its troops, and to the courage of the Somali people. Kenya has vowed not to be deterred by the attack against its soldiers. Equally, Somalis are neither cowed nor deflected from their goals by al-Shabaab atrocities. This is not to underestimate the challenges ahead, but as we enter a critical year for the country's transformation, Somalia's steady progress will continue. That will require Somali leadership and sustained support of the Council. Mr. President, Success in Somalia in 2016 will depend upon managing threats, notably those posed by al-Shabaab, as well as seizing the opportunities that political progress will bring. The security situation remains very challenging. The SRCC will say more. We owe a great debt to the courage and dedication of AMISOM soldiers. Somalia's security requires a comprehensive approach. As the Secretary-General has indicated in his plan of action for preventing violent extremism, a full-spectrum approach. Our political, security, development, and human rights efforts must proceed together and reinforce each other. Military and counter-terrorism efforts need to be accompanied by stronger policing and rule of law. A priority must be to strengthen federal institutions and regional capabilities within Somalia as a basis for longer-term transition plan for AMISOM. This needs to be complemented by work to strengthen institutions, generate jobs with the private sector, and reduce dependence upon humanitarian aid. Mr. President, security remains a paramount concern. Too many civilians and too many soldiers are dying. Al-Shabaab remains a potent threat. I am encouraged by the commitments made by President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud in September 2015 to security sector reform, including a comprehensive review of the sector, timely and adequate pay by electronic means, and a transfer to a unified biometric registration system. AMISOM and its partners stand ready to support these important initiatives. The federal government is currently developing a national security policy, which is urgently required. The establishment of a national security architecture must be complemented by the creation of clear police, justice, and corrections models for Somalia in the context of federalism, not least as the basis for coordinated support by international partners. I hope we see progress on this set of issues before the high-level partnership forum in Istanbul next month. Mr. President, the humanitarian situation remains worrisome. The underlying causes of Somalia's protracted crisis remain unresolved. Millions of children, women, and elderly people are acutely vulnerable. In total, some 4.9 million people, representing 40% of the total population, are in need of humanitarian assistance. Over 1.1 million people remain internally displaced. Some 300,000 children under the age of 5 are acutely malnourished. Millions lack access to basic health care, water, and sanitation. The Somalia Humanitarian Country Team recently launched the Humanitarian Response Plan for 2016 with a total requirement of $885 million to save lives, strengthen livelihoods, improve access to basic services, and protect vulnerable groups, including by seeking durable solutions for the internally displaced. The overarching objective is both to meet pressing need, to build resilience, and reduce dependence upon humanitarian aid. It needs to be generously supported. Mr. President, all our efforts will be conditional upon political progress. Last November, thousands of Somalis across the country, from all walks of life, took part in a national consultative forum. This signaled a decisive step towards democracy, transparent and inclusive consultations on an electoral model for 2016, with the active participation of women, youth, and minorities. The Mogadishu Declaration of the 16th of December 2015 outlined key principles, including on term limits, the quality of the electoral process, and the participation and representation of women and youth. Mr. President, it therefore gives me particular pleasure to share some breaking news with you. This morning, a decision was taken by the Somali cabinet on the electoral model to be used later this year. This is the culmination of almost 6 months' intense consultations. It may be a watershed moment, marking the growing political maturity of a federal Somalia. The federal government has taken a bold decision. Leaders of the Somali regions, while many differences and concerns remain, recognize its importance. As I speak, they are engaged on discussions around its implementation. Reaching a decision on the electoral model was not easy. Following repeated rounds of consultations among Somali leaders in Kismayo and in Mogadishu, and prolonged deadlock, the leaders of the federal government recognized that the national interest demands that the leaders of the federal that demands forward momentum. The model envisages that a lower house of 275 members, based upon maintenance of the 4.5 power sharing formula between the clans, and an upper house of 54 members, based on equal representation of the existing, emerging and prospective federal member states, and the allocation of additional seats to the pre-existing entities of Puntland and Somaliland. This, Mr. President, is a Somali-devised model. It is Somali-led and Somali-owned. Unity among international partners in support of the process leading to this decision has been exemplary. International partners will need to work with Somali stakeholders to ensure its timely implementation. I hope I have the support of the Security Council in that endeavor. The decision marks an important milestone for Somalia, for the federal government, and for the leaders of the federal member states. There are many more ahead. The journey is going to be long and bumpy. Much work remains to be done on the details related to the implementation of the electoral model and to ensure agreement of a political roadmap for the period from 2016 to 2020 to deliver universal elections by that date. We must navigate around potential obstacles and will face obstructions along the way. Spoiler behavior will need to be contained, and we must be ready to provide assistance to federal and regional leaders. Mr. President, real momentum could and should result from this breakthrough that has been achieved today. This could spur other critical processes. I welcome the launch of the state formation process in Hiran and Middle Shabelle on the 12th of January. Once that process is finished and the status of Mogadishu Benadir is clarified, the map of the new federal Somalia will be complete. Progress has also been made in recent months on the review of the Provisional Federal Constitution. A technical review of 10 of its 15 chapters has been completed, and the major political issues to be addressed are now much clearer. The federalization process must not just be a top-down mechanical exercise. To succeed in the long term, it must be an endeavor in which all the people of Somalia have a real stake. There is much left to do to ensure reconciliation and unity. Freedom of expression and opinion has been challenged in recent months, and I call upon the Somali authorities to respect that freedom. Mr. President, Ambassador Madeira and I are looking forward to strengthening and deepening the working relationship between the UN and the AU on the ground. In line with Resolution 2245, we will convene a senior leadership coordination forum between UNSOM, AMISOM and UNSOS to discuss our strategic and operational priorities. We are committed to taking full advantage of the creation of UNSOS and the opportunities that affords for greater coherence and effectiveness. We share a commitment to implementation of the human rights due diligence policy, which remains an important tool to promote respect for human rights and to ensure accountability in a volatile military context. For its objectives to be met, a strong working partnership with AMISOM, as well as with the individual troop contributing countries, is essential, including to follow up on allegations and ensure accountability. This is in all our interests. Human rights violations will erode the population's support for AMISOM and for the Somali federal government. As I have outlined here, the challenges, Mr. President, are manifold. In the coming months, I will work with Somali leaders, civil society, and the international community to support a comprehensive approach, embracing political, security, development, and human rights priorities. The exciting thing is that increasingly, politics is displacing violence as a means of resolving differences among Somalis. There is an eager desire to advance and to leave the suffering and divisions of the past behind. Let me conclude by saying that the unity of the Security Council and the coherence of the broader international community provides a powerful basis for the UN and for our AU partners to make a decisive contribution to Somalia's future. You have my commitment and that of the entire UN team that we will support the leaders and people of Somalia to realize their goal of a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic future. I hope to achieve more before the high-level partnership forum in Istanbul and look forward to seeing you there in February. Thank you, Mr. President.
Doy las gracias.
I thank Mr. Keating for that briefing provided to the Council. I now give the floor to Mr. Francisco Caetano Jose Madeira. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Mr. President, thank you for giving me the floor. And I thank you more sincerely for this opportunity to brief the Security Council alongside the new Special Representative of the Secretary General, my colleague and brother, Mr. Michael Keating. I welcome him to Somalia since he has admitted that I'm senior. I've been there a week earlier than him. It is my belief that we shall continue to build together on the good working relations already established by our predecessors in the delivery of our shared mandates. Mr. President, I briefed this Council barely 2 weeks after the deadly attack on AMISOM El Ade base in Gedo region and of the Lido attack. The attack at Gedo and the previous attacks on AMISOM forward operating bases illustrate the continuing threat all our forces face in the fight against Al-Shabaab. I pay tribute to all the AMISOM uniformed personnel who continue to exhibit professionalism, tenacity, and courage in the campaign to degrade Al-Shabaab's capacity. I would also like to make special mention of the troop and police contributing countries. I would like to once again express my grief and condolences to the families of all our fallen heroes who have paid the ultimate price in the service of Africa, but also in the preservation of global peace and security. Mr. President, my briefing today will focus on recent security and political developments in Somalia. Since my predecessor last briefed the Council in May 2015, we have continued to make significant security gains. AMISOM and SNA commenced renewed offensive operations codenamed Operation Juba Corridor in July 2015. These joint operations are currently in their third phase and are expected to be completed by March 2016. The overall strategic objective of the current operations remain significantly degrade the capabilities of Al-Shabaab in its remaining strongholds. This would provide the enabling environment for the advancement of the much-needed political process. Mr. President, the dislodging of Al-Shabaab from towns and villages under its control has led to an overstretched capacity of AMISOM with its attendant security implications, which Al-Shabaab is trying to exploit. As the attacks in Al-Ade, as well as similar attacks in Lego and Janale suggest, Al-Shabaab has become changed, has resorted to change tactics in launching a combination of asymmetrical and direct attacks on AMISOM bases. In this respect, we have seen an incremental occurrence of guerrilla warfare as well as the use of IEDs in their attacks. Overall, the security situation in Somalia has remained somehow fluid, volatile, and unpredictable in some aspects, despite the territorial gains that we have achieved so far. On the political front, I am encouraged by the progress that the people and government of Somalia continue to make in the state formation process, in the revision of their constitution, as well as in the preparation for the holding of elections later this year. In this regard, in regard to state formation, the government embarked on the process for the formation of the final regional administration for Iran and Middle Shabelle, as my colleague has just alluded earlier this month. We welcome this initiative and continue to urge the federal government of Somalia to take the necessary steps towards achieving a positive outcome which would see the establishment of this last regional administration. In the area of elections, as expressed jointly with Mr. Keaton, we are very pleased that an electoral model was unanimously agreed by the government just yesterday, as the Ambassador, the Special Representative has just mentioned. This model is based on a unique balance of representation between clan and constituency and offers a hopeful outlook for an inclusive electoral process. I continue to urge Council and other partners to support the federal government of Somalia in the effective implementation of this electoral model, based on the declared principles and time frame of the election. I would like to commend the federal government of Somalia for reaffirming its commitment to respect the constitutionally mandated terms of the legislature and the executive, which expire in August and September 2016, respectively. This is consistent with AU's Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Whilst the political progress made is laudable, much more needs to be done in the consolidation of this process, as well as in the rejuvenation of the constitutional review process, which remains a critical pillar to political stability in Somalia. Mr. President, I would like to reassure Council that the AU remains committed to supporting of peace and stability in Somalia amidst the immense sacrifices made and challenges that the mission continues to face. In this respect, I would want to urge the Council to consider the strengthening of our partnership in the following areas in order to further enhance the implementation of AMISOM's mandate. First, I would like to emphasize that the Somali National Army is central to the conduct of joint operations as well with AMISOM, as well as in taking over security functions in the recovered areas to facilitate continued offensive operations. It is also of note that the only viable process that will lead to the realization of AMISOM's mandate in Somalia and its subsequent exit strategy is the standing up of a capable, legitimate, and inclusive Somali National Army. In the same vein, I urge Council to ensure that the pledges made towards the Gulwade plan are fulfilled. The international community also needs to be better coordinated in its support for the Somali security forces and otherwise. Second, I would like to stress that better coordination between the multiplicity of partners, and specifically between AMISOM, UNSOS, and UNSOM, remains vital more than ever before. Council would recall that Resolution 2245, adopted on 4th November 2015, underscored the need to ensure operational efforts and cooperation between UNSOM and AMISOM, that these are aligned with a common set of strategic priorities. Under the new leadership of Mr. Keaton and myself, we are hopeful that there would be progress in the strengthening and revitalization of the joint senior leadership decision-making framework, and we are already working on this. I also look forward to the joint development of the quantitative compact between the head of UNSOS and myself, which is expected to enhance the provision of support to AMISOM. Our recent interactions with the Under-Secretary General for Feed Support Operations on the provision of timely and flexible support to AMISOM has been very positive and very encouraging. Third, the provision of additional enablers remains central to AMISOM's operations. It will be recalled that the governments of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda have pledged helicopters to AMISOM. However, the tripartite letters of assist between these TCCs, the AU, and the UN remain outstanding. We would like to urge Council to request the Secretary General to facilitate an expedited negotiation process that takes into account the unique nature of AMISOM offensive mandate. This would allow for the deployment of these assets, which are urgently required in boosting the operational tempo of AMISOM and in dislodging Al-Shabaab's presence in some places or throughout Mogadishu. Fourth, the AU is committed to improving AMISOM's strategy in Somalia. I am pleased to report to Council that the AU is currently organizing a TCC summit expected to lead to the political commitment amongst the various stakeholders on how to address, amongst other issues, command and control, provision of additional enablers, and enhance overall coordination. This summit will take place in due course earlier this year. Finally, grave concern has been brought about by the decision of the European Union to cut the allowances to the uniformed personnel of the mission by 20%, starting in January 2016. The African Union Commission is making all efforts to fill the gap created by this EU decision. In this regard, the AU recently appointed Mr. Donald Kaberuka as the High Representative on the AU Peace Fund, responsible for the mobilization of additional resources for the AU peace support operations. Immediate steps are also being taken to generate additional funds for AMISOM. However, this is occurring within the context of an economic downturn owing to the drastic reduction of commodity prices. Hence, I would like to urge Council to consider various funding mechanisms that would sustain the current support for AMISOM, including through the increased financial support by the UN, individual Council members, and other relevant stakeholders in the interest of global peace and security. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Madeira for his briefing. I now invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.